for another edition of the Penn State Blitz here on Penn Live. Greg Pickel.
Yes.
The news just keeps coming for this Penn State football program. We got to talk about another coaching move.
Yes.
And Penn State lost not only a very good position coach, but a great recruiter in Josh Gattis. Reportedly,
yes.
I guess not official yet, but he's supposed to be headed to Alabama.
Right.
Nick Saban acted quickly. He lost a coach, I think, to the Buffalo Bills, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Promoted Mike Loxley, had an opening for a wide receivers coach slash co-offensive coordinator. Josh Gattis is headed south, and what does that mean for James Franklin?
Yeah, I think that the first things first, Bob, is that people were a little bit, I guess, confused about why Josh Gattis would leave for this job, because it's in a way viewed as a lateral move with the similar position coach and also the co-offensive coordinator spot. It's not a lateral move.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, there's no way around it. You can look at this Penn State program any way you want it. It's on the rise, and it's had some of the best 2 years that it's had in a really long time. All those things to be true. Alabama's Alabama, Bob. You don't see a lot of guys turning down the opportunity to coach with Nick Saban, to coach for the Crimson Tide. I mean, they're at the pinnacle of the sport and have been for quite some time. So the move makes sense. The other thing, too, I don't know how you feel about this, but to me, you listen to Ricky Rahne, you listen to James Franklin talk. Bob, I don't think he wants to be a head coach. I think if Penn State's offense is good, he will be entrenched as the offensive coordinator for as long as James Franklin is the head coach.
Yeah.
So if you're an offensive staffer and you want to be an offensive coordinator or maybe a head coach one day, you're probably not going to get the experience that you could get elsewhere doing staying on this Penn State staff. You could argue that co-offensive coordinator could be a money title more than anything else, but still, it comes with the opportunity to coach with and under Nick Saban. And guess what? That's spawned a lot of big coaching moves, coordinators, and things like that. I think it's an interesting move for Josh Gattis, gets him back in the SEC, and we'll see. But for James Franklin, it's another coach to replace. I think anytime you lose a guy at Alabama, you're probably doing a pretty good job, and you probably picked out a good guy to hire way back when.
Yeah, and the question becomes just how big of a loss is this for Penn State? They lose Charles Huff. They have to bring another coach on board to coach the running backs. But Josh Gattis also developed some good wide receiver talent. Where will they miss him most? And when you combine the loss of him and Huff, how does that impact Penn State recruiting moving forward?
I think it's probably significant. I mean, you lose two of your arguably best recruiters, or at least two of your top 3 or 4. I mean, these guys were very good at connecting with kids no matter where they were recruiting. They had a good, Josh served as the offensive recruiting coordinator for 4 seasons. He actually had that role changed to Tyler Bowen, and he became the passing game coordinator in the shuffling of titles when Bowen and Galliano were hired, and then David Corley came in. So, I mean, he's a guy that's been actively involved with it. He's done on offense what Terry Smith has done on defense in a lot of ways, and Huff was good too. So you lose 2 guys that pop up into recruiter rankings all the time, 2 guys that really recruit it well, whether it was the South, whether it was Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. It's a lot to replace. It's not to say it's not something you can't overcome, because certainly they'll be able to, but big shoes to fill. Interesting
just to see now with him, in all likelihood, moving forward. Again, as we talk about it, it's not really been made official, but one of his last things that he did for Penn State was he helped get Justin Shorter to Penn State, and a lot of people believe that if he can continue to develop and play like the way that he did at camps and on the prep level, he will be probably the recruit that Josh Gattis probably will be most associated with, because he has that kind of upside.
Well, keep in mind, too, that he's the guy that's been committed for a long time, the highest rated receiver that Penn State signed in a long time. One of the only, him and Micah Parsons, top 10 guys in the class. I mean, we're talking about things that Penn State recruiting really hasn't done in a long time. But the other thing, too, is Daniel George is the 4-star no one talks about from Maryland, that Josh Gattis had a big role in, an Oxon Hill kid, and Jahan Dotson. I mean, this is a guy that a lot of people think could also be in position to play maybe early on, maybe not year 1, but at some point he was a 4-star at one point, committed to UCLA. Josh went out and convinced him, along with the rest of the offensive staff, that Penn State was the best option for him once the coaching change happened at UCLA, and maybe things weren't going the same direction that they once were out there. So, I mean, it's another thing, too. You talk about the early signing period. All these kids signed up to play for Josh Gattis, and that's no longer, at least as long as the reports are true, which they seem to be going to be the case. So it's definitely an interesting nugget to file away when you talk about this new early signing period and how it impacts kids.
So let's move on to second down.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that James Franklin was not shocked when Joe Moorhead left.
Yeah.
It was only a matter, he was a short timer at Penn State because of success, probably didn't shock him that Huff left, maybe because it was a promotion for him to go with Moorhead to Mississippi State. But this late in the season, the off season, after the Fiesta Bowl, I have to think this caught him a little bit by surprise. The Gattis move. So now, what does he do? What are some of the names kind of we're hearing that possibly James Franklin might be considering replacing?
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting thing is that every time he's made a hire, it's never been the guy or the guys that were quickly associated with. So those are two that I think that are worth talking about. The two that comes up immediately, Bobby Ingram, 4th year, I believe, as the wide receiver coach of the Baltimore Ravens. He's made a couple other stops. He just coached Deshaun Hamilton and the North team receivers in the Shrine game last weekend. So the question, I think, with him is, well, number one, would James Franklin be interested? And keep in mind, he only has one letterman on staff in Terry Smith, so that's always something you can lean back on. Justin King, of course, in the recruiting department. But so is that something? But Bobby Ingram be interested? I mean, the NFL, you work a lot of hours, don't get me wrong, but you don't got to go on the road recruiting. There's a lot of things you don't have to worry about at that level, and is it something he would even be interested in? So I would think probably not. I don't know, man. That's a tough transition to make back to the college game when you don't have to worry about all that stuff. And the other name that came up right away was Terry Smith because of what he did as a wide receiver at Penn State. And could Penn State move him to the other side of the ball? My initial inclination was no. Why? Because Josh Gattis was a defensive back. He could have coached the defensive backs when they got to Penn State, and Terry Smith could have coached the receivers, but they didn't switch those two around. Terry Smith has done a really nice job with the defensive backs, and I think we see this more and more where guys don't necessarily coach the position or even the same side of the ball that they played on in college. It's just not the way it works. You'd think it would, but it doesn't. David Corley, a record-setting quarterback at William & Mary, now is going to coach the running backs. So I think you probably throw those two names out there and look for somebody in the field, somebody that's not necessarily on the radar at this point, but that James Franklin certainly has on his.
For you young Penn State fans out there, Bobby Ingram was a key piece of the 1994 unbeaten team, a wideout, 2 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, went on to play a long time in the NFL, with the Seahawks, the Bears. I would just say this about job security in the NFL. It's not like the Ravens wideouts are really putting on a show at the next level. So maybe if there's any truth at all to it, maybe he at least considers coming back home. He's got a lot of talent to work with. The Ravens, as I said, they haven't really produced many big-name wideouts in the last couple of years. So we'll see. But you're right. James Franklin probably has somebody else on the list. It'll be
not being considered probably comes from either an FCS or a lower-level Division I. I mean, he's proven to be really good at finding those guys.
At like 5:01 p.m. this Friday, we'll learn, just as we're ready to dip into happy hour, we'll learn the identity of the new wideouts. Coach, get the third down. We already mentioned Joe Moorhead. One of our colleagues, the esteemed David Jones, had a chance to talk to Joe Moorhead via phone I think he was on a recruiting trip somewhere in the South, and he got
somewhere in the middle of Mississippi.
He got Joe Moorhead on the phone and talked to him about his time at Penn State, and Dave had a chance to maybe ask him a little bit about his thoughts about the Penn State offense moving forward, also his successor Ricky Rahne, what he might do, and Joe Moorhead, just like James Franklin, is a big fan of Ricky Rahne, and he does not think the offense will miss a beat, and he also thinks that it won't be that hard to move on from Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, he had a lot of good things to say about both Miles Sanders and about Ricky Rahne, and I think the most interesting thing to me, Bob, that's maybe been overlooked in this whole thing is that when they needed to put somebody upstairs to run down what was going on to Joe Moorhead so that when Trace McSorley looked to the sideline, as you so often see him do, they knew what to change into. They trusted Ricky Rahne with that job for 2 years. And Rahne now is the guy that sits over top of and sees everything in the Fiesta Bowl, the most yards in the Fiesta Bowl history Penn State had. And after the game, he said that communication wasn't an issue. So you're going to see him up there in that almost similar role. And I think Joe Moorhead knows how valuable it was to have him up there for 2 years, and that's why I think he's confident that Ricky Rahne can, keep the beat marching. And the other obvious one is, Miles Sanders, the big shoes to fill. He's been prominently featured by Penn State when they've been sharing stuff from winter workouts. It's going to be the spring and summer of Miles Sanders and Trace McSorley heading into 2018. That's where we're at.
I know, and Miles Sanders will probably get the job done in the fall, but anytime you replace a pick that's likely a top 5 pick.
Yeah, it's almost
in the NFL draft. I just don't. I mean, I just feel like Miles. Those are some big shoes to fill. Yeah. Hopefully, he can kind of relax and just do what he does. If he tries to do what Saquon Barkley did It's just not going to happen. It'll be a different-looking Penn State offense. Curious to see about the incoming blue chip running back Slade to see if he can make his presence felt. But yeah, it was good to see that Joe Moorhead was able to spend some time with our David Jones, and we'll see how he does at Mississippi State. That won't be easy either.
Well, no, it won't, but there'll be a lot of Penn State fans following that closely. It's like when Bill O'Brien left his first year. I think Penn State fans may have paid as close attention to that as they did Penn State's season. Joe Moorhead will have plenty of Big Ten supporters as well.
Sure. Fourth down. It is Senior Bowl week, and Penn State will be very well represented. It was supposed to be 3 people: Marcus Allen, Mike Gesicki, and Christian Campbell, and now Deshaun Hamilton, fresh off his impressive practice field showing, I think, in the East-West Shrine Bowl, has been added. That's a nice representation for Penn State. You usually don't see that kind of Senior Bowl turnout.
No.
You know, for them, I can remember years when Carl Nassib was down there. I think Austin Johnson was down there, but not a clustering of Penn State players. Obviously, had Saquon Barkley been a senior, he might have been down there.
Or a junior that graduated.
Or a junior that graduated.
That's the 2 ways you
get
in.
But when you look at the group of 4, what are you most looking forward to this week as far as, you know, it's not really the Senior Bowl game.
Right.
It's almost anticlimactic. It's what you do during the week on the practice field and how you interact with all of the teams. What are you most looking forward to see, and is there a name you're going to be following closely?
Yeah, I want to hear more about Mike Gesicki. I mean, we knew what he could do from an athletic standpoint, from obviously being a tight end in Penn State's offense, but you're not hearing his name all that much right now, and I think this is a week that we're going to find out where exactly he stands. We've heard about draft grades for Jason Kabinda and Marcus Allen. Christian Campbell, there's a couple guys out there that just love him. I know you do as well. I think he's going to be a little bit more on the scene, if you will, after this week. Marcus Allen, too. I mean, he's a guy that Mel Kiper gave a 5th-round grade. Can he help improve his stock this week? I was surprised by that, to be honest. I thought he'd be a little bit higher. That was the first we've heard Kiper talk about him. I'll be curious to see if that changes after this game, after the Combine. So we'll see how that all works out. But, yeah, I mean, I think there's a good group down here, and Deshaun Hamilton might have the best chance of all to up his draft stock. You don't see too often guys get invited after a Shrine game. I think that tells you that, well, obviously someone got hurt or decided not to show up, but also that there were a lot of candidates to be picked, and he impressed enough at the Shrine game to earn a spot there. I mean, we're talking about a guy that I think most thought would go late day 3. You have to wonder now where he's going to work himself up to by the time the draft rolls around.
Yeah, Mel Kiper's been wrong before. I mean, he's been wrong almost as much as he's been right. As far as Marcus Allen, he was never a great coverage player at Penn State, but they didn't really ask him to do a lot in coverage. What I would say about Marcus is, you know, Adrian Amos, when he came out of Penn State, I think went in the 5th round to the Bears, and they are talking about Adrian Amos now in the NFL as in consideration to be in the Pro Bowl consideration every year. And I think Marcus has a little bit more upside than Adrian Amos. I would be surprised if he would slip into the 5th round.
Agreed.
I think maybe 3rd, 4th round. I never really was sure if he was going to be late first, which I still see in some mock drafts. Maybe it's the 2nd round. But yeah, 5th round seems to be a little bit low for him. The other thing, just one other point, is that I think Christian Campbell, one of the reasons why his stock can go up is because physically he's going to test very well. I mean, and he's got the measurables which teams covet. He's a long corner who can run. He was not really a great playmaker at Penn State. He did play early at Penn State, but you look at him and you look at Grant Haley and all the things that Grant Haley did at Penn State, but because Christian Campbell's probably 3 or 4 inches taller than him, he's a little bit bigger. Unfortunately, you know, Grant's probably got a tougher road to get to the NFL than Christian.
Yeah, just on measurables alone.
But I am looking forward to see what Mike Gesicki can do, and what when they do put him in one-on-one blocking drills, like how that's going to play out for him. He is essentially just a wide receiver, a bigger wide receiver, but there is a role for that in the NFL, but it's very specific. I don't know that Mike would be a 3-down player. I mean, but I do think he would show up in the passing game, and for that reason, he might slip, you know, a round or 2 in the NFL draft. We'll see. That's what the Senior Bowl is all about. I can't wait to hear Mike Mayock start talking about these guys. I'm especially looking forward to when he gets his hands on Saquon Barkley's tape and gets a chance to watch him do some drills, you know, later in Indianapolis. That'll be fun. But yeah, it's been a busy offseason for Penn State, and I have to say the Josh Gattis news I think surprised a lot of people. Good for him, but I think that is a pretty big loss for Penn State, and I think they're going to be scrambling, I think, Greg, to replace it.
It's tough. I mean, you get into this time of year where everyone needs a 10th assistant coach. Penn State thought they were done. They thought they had their guy. They were eyeing up a couple different coaches, obviously, to replace Charles Huff in the running back role. They had a plan originally to just promote Phil Galliano, the special teams coordinator, when the 10th coach became available. That went out the door. When Huff left, they promote Galliano immediately to keep the recruiting intact.
Yeah.
Now they're in a situation where, again, they don't have a full staff.
Right.
They're going down to the wire with a couple of guys, Rasheed Walker obviously being one of them, Solomon Enos being another. You have to wonder how the departure of Josh Gattis affects Solomon Enos' recruiting. What if Alabama decides to get involved? I don't know where they're at on any front, whether it's numbers-wise, whether it's need for receiver, I don't know. But what if they get involved? Then what happens? You know, it's just... There's a lot of things that come into play now. I think it took a lot of people by surprise, and we'll see. You have to go find a coach now you didn't expect you were going to have to.
All right, we're almost done with this edition of the Penn State Blitz. Do you have any overtime questions?
Two of them came in.
You have to get off your chest. I know you're an Eagles fan. Are they Eagles-related questions, Greg?
No, they're not.
Good, because I was not prepared to answer them.
All right, number one, Bob. Christian Campbell, we just talked about him a little bit. The length makes him a potential top 40 prospect, according to one scout, Eric Galco of Optimum Scouting. Where does he go? Is he a day one guy, a day two guy, or a day three guy?
I think he is in the running to be, well, a day one guy is just the first round.
Right.
So I really don't. That would be more surprising than Gattis leaving. I mean, there's one thing to be an athlete, but it's also production. He dealt with injuries. I do think there's a place for Christian in the middle round somewhere. I do think he can play. The fact that he can play very well on special teams will you know, and you wonder if maybe he can be like a hybrid. Is he big enough to kind of do some nickel stuff, some safety stuff? I definitely think once you get past the Barkleys, Gesicki's, Marcus Allens, he could be the next name you hear get drafted just because of the position he plays, the need in the NFL for longer corners. I'm sure some teams are going to have him rated higher than other teams. I can't say that he's a first-round pick. I don't know that Penn State's ever had a first-round corner ever get picked. Yeah. And they've had some pretty good players come through. I do think, though, he, along with Deshaun Hamilton, have the chance to maybe make the biggest move. Yeah. Depending on how these games and practices go, because he definitely is an athlete. He battled injuries. I thought he played pretty well as a senior. Yep. And you've seen teams fall in love with guys after 1 year of solid production if they run 4.5 or 4.4 and they have the height. So we'll see. I think first round's a pretty big stretch. If that guy nails that pick, he really knows what he's doing. I think, you're talking about third or fourth round.
All right, one more, Bob, before we get out of here. Different positions, but they're still projected to go in about the same spot of the draft. Who goes higher, Mike Gesicki or Marcus Allen?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is, because you look at what teams do with the tight end anymore, and the question, I think a lot of it comes down to what happens over the next few months, both at private workouts, Penn State's Pro Day, the Senior Bowl. Where's the blocking scale? We've seen Mike Gesicki hit the blocking sled for every practice for the last 2.5 years. But is it at a point now where it is suitable for NFL teams to consider him as a guy that can do both? And that's a question we don't know. Marcus Allen, the question with him to answer is where do teams evaluate him coverage-wise, and what can he show them in an environment that he's not, as Brent Price said before the Fiesta Bowl, basically has to play linebacker for 3 downs.
Well, there is a trend in the NFL where you have safeties, you put a little bit of weight on them, and you play them at outside linebacker in the 4-3. The Cardinals did that with Deontay Buchanan, Budda Baker. There's other players like that. That might be Marcus Allen's role. They might just say, look, you're really good at a couple of things, and they're around the line of scrimmage, so we're not going to ask you to do a lot in coverage. I think that Marcus Allen will get picked before Gesicki. Okay. What's going to happen? Gesicki's going to have to convince teams that he can play more than one role. To me, the role that he looks like is he's going to be really good in the red zone. He's going to be a mismatch problem. But what value do you place on that? Right. I mean, where he's not Rob Gronkowski. Who is he? I mean, how many tight ends are more polished? Yeah. Could do more things. What's the trend there? I could see Marcus Allen going in the second round. I really could. I'm not saying it would be early. I think that Mike Gesicki has some work to do between now and the end of April to earn maybe that early second round status. I'm not sure he's there yet. He can get there. He's a phenomenal athlete. If he just puts up incredible numbers at the combine, it could be all over. It only takes one or two teams to have a need to fall in love with you. That's one of your better questions. I could be wrong about that one, but both players are unique athletes, and I think it's just going to come down to which team really kind of focuses in on those guys. But right now, I think Allen will go before Gesicki.
All right, Bob. Well, that's it for us this week. We can guarantee that all 3 days will have Penn State flavors at the NFL draft, and we'll see soon enough if it's 1 week, 2 weeks, or more before Penn State hires a new coach.
Yeah, you got it.